For years, I tried to make my marriage work, pouring effort into a relationship that, in hindsight, was doomed from the start. Once warm and loving, my wife had slowly become distant and cruel, making subtle jabs at my expense. I told myself it was just a phase, that maybe she was going through something, but the truth was undeniable. She was slowly tearing me down, and I had to find out why. I tried hard to keep my marriage strong, yet my wife began acting distant. Her once warm presence turned cold, and her subtle digs became frequent, chipping away at my confidence. At first, I told myself it was just a rough patch, perhaps stress or fatigue. But as time passed, I saw her actions weren't accidental. They were deliberate. The person I once trusted seemed to enjoy watching me doubt myself. It hurt to admit, but I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. Her growing disrespect wasn't a phase. It was her true feelings breaking through the facade. I started feeling uneasy when my wife began inviting friends and family to gatherings where I became the target of her jokes. What once seemed playful turned increasingly harsh, with her teasing crossing lines I wasn't comfortable with. She'd laugh it off, but the constant jabs hurt, eroding my trust. I held my tongue, hoping she'd ease up, but instead her remarks only grew sharper. Then one evening, I overheard her on the phone. Her voice was animated, hinting at a big reveal she had planned for our anniversary party. My heart sank as I realized this wasn't just her way of blowing off steam. There was something more calculated in her tone, something unsettling. The thought of her planning to make a public scene left me feeling trapped and betrayed. This was no longer just teasing, it was something far more personal and possibly humiliating, waiting to unfold. Determined to uncover what my wife was planning, I hesitated but finally checked her messages. My heart pounded as I read texts between her and her friends, revealing her intent to teach me a lesson. The words stung. She was orchestrating a public humiliation, plotting to expose personal details and depict me as a failure in front of everyone we knew. Each message confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't just teasing or frustration. She wanted to shatter my reputation, to embarrass me in front of the people who mattered most. Realizing the depth of her resentment felt like a gut punch. I knew I had to brace myself for the betrayal that lay ahead, but I also felt an unyielding need to protect my dignity. As I processed the betrayal, my heart sank, but soon anger took its place. I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was her deliberate attempt to tear me down. She had lost all respect for me, and the depth of her actions became clear. The person I thought I knew was now someone I barely recognized. I couldn't allow her to humiliate me without consequences. Determined to regain control, I began planning how to turn the tables. I wouldn't let her scheme go unchallenged. If she wanted to expose my flaws, I would show her that I was no longer the person she could walk all over. It was time to shift the power dynamic and reveal the true character of her actions, making sure she understood the cost of her manipulation. I knew I needed to act strategically, so I decided to gather evidence of her cruelty and deceit. I printed out screenshots of her messages, each one revealing the depth of her betrayal and the lies she had spread. My plan wasn't to embarrass her, despite how much she had hurt me, but to expose her true nature for what it was. At the upcoming anniversary party, I will reveal everything. It wasn't about revenge, but about ensuring that everyone saw who she really was, not the image she had carefully crafted. I wanted to make sure the truth came to light, even if it meant risking everything. I was done being the target of her manipulation. It was time to turn the tables and take back my power. As the anniversary party drew near, I kept my composure, playing the part of the oblivious husband. I smiled, chatted with guests, and acted as if nothing was wrong, all while my mind churned with the plan I had set in motion. My wife seemed thrilled, confident that I was completely unaware of her scheme. Her excitement only fueled my resolve. I could see the smugness in her behavior, the way she looked at me with that air of superiority, thinking she had the upper hand. Little did she know, I was already steps ahead. The longer she assumed I was clueless, the more satisfying it would be to reveal the truth at the perfect moment. The moment finally arrived at the anniversary party, and my wife stood up with that smug confidence, ready to make her humiliating speech. But I had prepared for this moment. As she began, I calmly interrupted her. The room instantly fell silent, sensing something was off. I took a deep breath and pulled out the printed screenshots from my phone, one by one, showing her messages. I began sharing my side of the story. As her cruel behavior escalated, I began to gather the courage to stand up for myself. The final straw came when I overheard her plotting to publicly humiliate me at our anniversary party. It was clear that I had been nothing more than a target for her manipulation. Determined not to let her get away with it, I set a plan in motion to expose her, showing her true colors to everyone who had supported her. I laid out every detail, exposing how she had been plotting this cruel act for weeks. I showed her conversations with friends where she bragged about teaching me a lesson by publicly humiliating me. As the evidence unfolded, gasps and shocked expressions filled the room. Her once supportive friends and family now saw her for who she truly was. There was no denying it. The person I thought I knew had been lying to everyone, including me. The atmosphere shifted from confusion to disbelief. My wife was left speechless, completely taken aback by the turn of events. Her plan had backfired, and she stood there, unable to defend herself. The truth had come to light, and the people who had been on her side were now questioning everything. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction as I watched her crumble. It wasn't about revenge, but about reclaiming my dignity. I had stood up for myself, and for the first time in ages, I felt empowered. That moment was a turning point. The weight I had carried for so long was finally lifted. In front of everyone, I was no longer the victim. She was. And as painful as it was, I knew it was the only way to truly free myself from the toxic hold she had on me. Gasps filled the room as her friends and family processed the truth. Their shocked expressions spoke volumes as they realized what she had been planning. It was a moment of pure clarity, watching her carefully crafted image crumble in front of the very people who had supported her. The weight of her manipulation was now undeniable, and I stood there unmoved as she was forced to face the consequences of her actions. My wife was left speechless, her confidence shattered by the turn of events. The room was filled with an uncomfortable silence before the storm hit. Friends and family confronted her, expressing their disgust and disbelief at her behavior. They were horrified by the cruelty she had planned, and their harsh words left her no room to defend herself. As the confrontation unfolded, I felt a strange mix of relief and satisfaction. It was finally over. The weight that had been pressing down on me for so long was lifting, piece by piece. I had stood up for myself in a way I never thought possible, confronting the very person who had torn me down for so long. Watching her crumble, unable to defend her actions, was a bittersweet victory. The facade she had so carefully crafted was shattered, and the truth was laid bare for everyone to see. For the first time in ages, I felt free. The tension that had clouded every aspect of my life was gone. I no longer had to tolerate her manipulation or endure the constant disrespect. It was empowering to know that I had finally taken control of my narrative. The fear of confrontation had been replaced by a sense of relief that I could move forward with my life, without her toxicity hanging over me. At that moment, I realized I had been holding on to a relationship that had long since been broken. Letting go wasn't just a choice, it was a necessity. And as I walked away from that night, I knew I was free to rebuild my life on my own terms. In the aftermath, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. Ending the toxic relationship was painful, but it was necessary. I had spent so long trying to fix something that was broken, and finally I realized that the only way forward was to let go. The relief was immediate, but so was the clarity. I had done the right thing even if it hurt. This experience taught me an invaluable lesson about self-respect. I learned that no one, not even someone who was supposed to be my partner, had the right to treat me with cruelty. I understood now that I didn't have to tolerate disrespect, and that protecting my dignity was more important than holding on to a relationship that was suffocating me. It was a painful but necessary step toward reclaiming my peace. With that toxic chapter finally closed, I've focused on building a healthier, more fulfilling life. It hasn't been easy, but each day feels like a step toward something better. I've learned to prioritize my well-being, to seek out people who value and respect me, and to embrace a future where I am no longer weighed down by someone else's cruelty. For the first time in a long while, I'm living for myself, finding joy in the little things, and rediscovering what it means to be truly at peace. The freedom I've gained has made all the difference, and I'm embracing this new start with a sense of hope and strength that I never knew I had. The moment of truth came when I confronted her at the party, revealing the depths of her betrayal. As she stood speechless, her plan backfired, and the room was filled with shock and disbelief. In that instant, I felt both relief and satisfaction. I had stood up for myself in a way I never thought possible. It wasn't just about exposing her. It was about freeing myself from the weight of her cruelty and taking control of my future.